All right, so Kamala Harris did a sit-down interview with Face the Nation where she was basically talking about the inability of Democrats to get anything past Joe Manchin and Kyrsten Sinema, but specifically this time talking about voting rights legislation. So I wanted to bring you this clip for a number of different reasons. First and foremost, as you are about to see, and I apologize for this in advance, but Kamala Harris just basically absolutely refuses to talk about the actual substance of what she and Joe Biden could be doing right now to fight for voting rights. She basically, this entire clip, it's about 2.5 minutes long, is just her virtue signaling without actually even touching on the actual substance of the question. So, you have been warned. Let's just go ahead and get into this absolutely infuriating clip.
People around the world watch what we do as America, and right now we're about to take ourselves off the map as a role model. If we let people destroy one of the most important pillars of a democracy, which is free and fair elections.
You're talking about what's happening in state capitals around the country.
I am talking about that.
Okay, I just want to take a quick pause. I know it's really early in this video, but already her, and I guess she's a politician, she's the vice president of the United States, so of course she's going to appeal to this, idea of the United States being this pure democracy on the global stage. First of all, we support the vast majority, whether militarily, logistically, or otherwise, we support the vast majority of dictators around the world. That's number one. And number two, even here domestically, we are nowhere close to being an actual representative democracy, okay? You, Kamala Harris, Joe Biden, the entirety of the Democratic establishment, also the entirety of the Republican Party, you are completely beholden to corporate interests. So let's not pretend like we are the purest of democracies and a couple mild changes around the edges or pushing back against this recent Republican assault on our so-called democracy is going to make us, this perfect representation of the free world, okay? It's just, a delusional set of premises basically to be basing her argument off of. But let's just go ahead and continue with her absolutely refusing to fight her own party that is blocking the legislation that she wants to get passed.
And I'm talking about what's not happening in this Capitol in Washington, D.C., which is the passing of the John Lewis Voting Rights Advancement Act and the Freedom to Vote Act. This is literally about our standing in the world. It's about the integrity of our democracy. When our kids look back 5-10 years from now at this moment, it will be on our watch that we either stood for and fought for our democracy or not. And I think that is all at stake right now.
But you still have the reality of a 50-50 Senate.
Correct.
And you have two senators who say they're not on board for changing the filibuster in order to try to push this through. So how do you overcome that democratic reality of not having the votes and not having a clear path forward?
We will do and look at whatever is necessary to push for Congress to take this issue on. And we have to. We have to.
Carve out to the filibuster.
I'm not saying that. What I'm saying is that we are going to urge the United States Congress, and we have been, to examine the tools they have available, to do what is necessary to fight for and retain the integrity of our voting system in America.
Okay, understand her response to that after literally just saying we need to do everything humanly imaginable to fight to protect our democracy. Immediately after that, she says she's not even outwardly in favor of a carve-out to the filibuster to get this passed. Let me tell you guys something. It absolutely will not get passed in any way, shape, or form. There is a 0% chance that it will get passed with Republican support in the Senate, okay? So that means you literally have to do a carve-out to the filibuster in order to get the legislation that she is talking about passed. So for her to then turn around after just saying we need to do everything humanly imaginable to fight for this legislation, she immediately then turns around and says, well, I'm not even necessarily in favor of the one thing that could actually get the legislation passed. Not, let alone, going out and actually fighting to get that carve out for the filibuster, but she's not even willing to publicly say that she is in favor of that. It's at face value a contradiction for what she just said a couple seconds before that. But let's hear the rest of this.
It sounds like you're open, though, to a carve out to the filibuster to get there. You were when you ran for president on the issue of climate. Are voting rights as important to you?
I believe that voting rights is one of the most significant issues that is facing us as individuals and as leaders today. There's no question. No question. Voting rights lead to every other right. Every other right. And so we need to prioritize it as a nation. I think it's really important that in this conversation about what's happening in Washington, D.C. on the issue of voting, that we not lose sight of the fact that there is one whole group of people, half of the United States Senate, who are refusing to even debate this issue.
No shit. I mean, literally no shit. Everybody understands what the Republican Party stands for. The reality of the situation is, as that reporter was just saying, you have the control of the Senate, right? You have a 50-50 split in the Senate with you, Kamala Harris, being that tie-breaking vote. So what the fuck good does it do to say over and over and over again, well, it's actually Republicans who are blocking our agenda? No, it's not Republicans blocking your agenda. If you use the strategy that she was just pointing out there of having a carve-out to the filibuster, you would just have to pressure like the two members of your party in whether it's Kirsten Sinema, Joe Manchin, or anybody else who's opposed to it. It's literally less than a handful of senators within your own party that are actually standing in the way of the rule change that would allow you to pass this legislation that you're talking about here. So understand the contradictions of her sitting here and saying this is the greatest fight of our lifetimes. This is to protect our place on the world stage. This is to prevent us from falling into, you know, a total fascist dystopia. Then why don't you go and fight for it? I mean, she's literally saying, I cannot do anything other than what? Urge Congress to go and pass this. That's it. I'm just going to urge them. I'm going to, you know, nudge my Republican senators in the hallway and hope that they do something about it. That's fucking delusional. The entirety of the Republican Party, as we are seeing with the legislation that's being passed all around the country right now, there's legislation passed here in my home state of Georgia that had blatantly racist things that the entire purpose of the legislation basically is to further disenfranchise minority voters, specifically the black community here in Atlanta. So, you know, it's not like it's, you know, not a black and white issue. We understand the situation. Republicans only win through undemocratic means. That's how this entire operation works. I'm only 22 years old. I don't think in the entirety of my lifetime, at least, that a Republican president has actually won the popular vote in an election. It's just not really something that happens. They either win via the Electoral College, which is inherently undemocratic, or they rely on other things like gerrymandering or a host of other disenfranchisement policies to win elections, okay? That's how they win. So why the fuck would you expect them to ever help you to pass voting rights that would actually expand the ability for people to vote when the entire way that they win elections is by restricting the capacity for people to vote? It's just completely delusional. So what could you be doing? Well, you could actually be going out there and fighting for it, as you just said that you were doing, okay? Their version of fighting for voting rights, or fighting for anything for that matter, we just saw how this played out on Build Back Better, but her and Joe Biden, the entirety of his administration's idea of going out and fighting for stuff is either doing like closed door, behind the scenes negotiations that the public doesn't have access to, in which they never get anything substantive done unless it's a corporate handout basically, or they basically just rely on things like this and going out and doing like mild interviews where you are not even willing to publicly say that you are in favor of the one strategy that could actually get some shit done. I mean, it's a complete fucking joke. That entire 2.5-minute clip that we just watched was 100% virtue signaling. She had absolutely nothing substantive to say, and so if this is all they got, then guess what, guys? Voting rights are not going to get passed, just like Build Back Better is not going to get passed. And, you know, again, we see the parallels with what we just saw in Build Back Better and the lack of the Joe Biden administration's ability or want to go out there and actually fight their own members or the members of their own party, okay? Here's just a reminder on what we just saw in Build Back Better. Corporate donations flowed into Joe Manchin's PAC ahead of the final no on Build Back Better. So I covered this, you know, a number of different industries, as they point out here, whether it's Goldman Sachs, Blue Cross Blue Shield, or Lockheed Martin. So we got the trifecta there. We got Wall Street, we got the health insurance industry, and we got we got the defense industry basically. And on top of that, we know his connections to the coal industry. So this motherfucker is taking all of these corrupt donations from all of these different various industries to gut Joe Biden's agenda and take out the most popular provisions within that agenda, okay? He's doing this not because he represents some conservative voters in West Virginia. I've covered this on this channel. They, you know, West Virginia voters overwhelmingly supported the $3.5 trillion Build Back Better Act. So it's not because he's representing his conservative voters, it's because he's corrupt. So the one strategy that you would have at your disposal as the vice president and the president of the United States is to go out there and use public pressure, the public pressure that comes with the overwhelming majority of the American people supporting what you're trying to do. And that goes for Build Back Better. It also goes for changing the filibuster in order to pass voting rights, which a vast majority of the country also supports. So listen, again, it's not that Joe Manchin and Kirsten Sinema have some like principled disagreements with either of these things, whether it's Build Back Better or the voting rights legislation. They don't have principled objections to them, okay? They are doing this because they are fucking corrupt. Joe Manchin is basically a Republican. He is functionally a Republican. So again, the only thing that you can actually do about this situation is to go out there and take on a public fight with these people. But Kamala Harris is not even willing to go out there and say she's in favor of the strategy, let alone call them out by name. So you're not going to be able to get absolutely jack shit done with this strategy. And it's just pathetic because, I mean, even the reporter in that clip, guys, she asked the question of, what are you going to do? Because you have a 50-50 split in the Senate, and, you got two people who they're just a no, and they do this calculus, right? And whether it's, the reporters in the mainstream media or whether it's the Joe Biden administration themselves, they view these votes as static, okay? They view them as if they are not subject to change, as if no amount of pressure could ever work to get Joe Manchin or Kirsten Sinema to fall in line. And so because they don't believe that any public pressure campaigns could actually work to get them to fall in line, they just throw their hands up and they say, well, I guess the calculus is in. That's it. That's the end of the story. Joe Manchin, he doesn't want a filibuster carve out, so I guess it's not going to be done. Of course it's not going to get done if you don't go out there and actually take on a fight. We know what Joe Manchin does when he is reacting to public pressure campaigns against him. When Joe Biden, just the other week or whatever, actually put out a statement, which was one of the most mild statements I've ever seen attacking Joe Manchin, where he was basically just calling him out and saying, listen, I think that Joe Manchin, he was dishonest in the negotiations that were happening behind the scenes on Build Back Better. Joe Manchin absolutely lost his fucking mind. He went spiraling. We saw this also when Bernie Sanders wrote an op-ed in a West Virginia newspaper, basically calling out Joe Manchin. He freaks out when you actually go out and make a public campaign against him. He would fall in line if you showed up in West Virginia, if you were going and doing rallies for Build Back Better or for the voting rights legislation. But that's the fight you would actually have to take on. And neither Joe Biden or Kamala Harris wants anything to do with that fight. So instead, we're not going to get any substantive legislation passed. Republicans are going to continue passing extremely authoritarian laws all around the country, basically completely unchecked. And we're going to have to sit here and listen to Kamala Harris and Joe Biden go out there and give us, these ridiculous platitudes and this virtue signaling about how there's this grand assault on our democracy, while they won't even do the bare minimum to actually go out there and fucking fight for it.